Accounts are being closed for no specific reason and people are unable to access their money. Doesn't sound like a good situation here. Now, it's definitely a nightmare situation, especially if you suddenly just can't access your hard-earned money, whether you bank at Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Capital One, Citibank, you name it. And there's always bound to be a chance that things could go wrong. However, it's very frustrating for many consumers and customers given the fact that the only option for banks whenever they feel like something is wrong is to either freeze your account or just take it down completely. Both options cutting your access off to your own money. But why do they do this? And why does it seem so random at times?
Banks do this when they suspect some form of bank fraud. But experts say in the majority of cases, no fraud is really found, leaving customers to wonder, why me? When we met Elad Niharai and his family, they had been at this Bank of America in West LA for hours, trying to get access to their life savings. That morning, when Elad tried to log on to his online bank account, he got this alert.
Bank of America told me it was shut down. They refused to give me an explanation. They told me I would get my money after it was resolved,
which he says he was told would take 10 to 20 days.
All of a sudden, I find out I'm broke, I can't feed my family, and I can't pay any expenses.
Now, the scary thing is this situation is not out of the ordinary. There are countless Americans who have faced this kind of situation. And to be honest, it's also kind of hard to blame the banks for this one. By the way, I just want to take a second and thank you guys for always liking these videos and sharing these videos. It really helps the channel out a lot. I cannot thank you guys enough for always doing that. So I just wanted to appreciate you guys for that. But again, to be honest with you guys, it is kind of hard to blame the banks on this one. That's because these financial institutions are obligated to alert both regulators and law enforcement through a suspicious activity report if there's anything out of the ordinary that they just can't easily explain that's going on with a particular bank account. So the problem here is that it's happening to plenty of banks to this day. Now, one of the more recent ones that it happened to is Citibank, where somebody's account was frozen after it received an email for a violation that was not explained at all. Now, this is not uncommon since I don't think that banks necessarily want to reveal exactly how these warnings come to their systems, but it's still highly frustrating for people who have to deal with it, especially when they've done nothing wrong. So matter of fact, a 2018 study showed that only 4% of 640,000 suspicious activity reports warranted any kind of follow-up from law enforcement, meaning that like 96% of their customers they just had their access to their cash impeded where they were completely innocent. So what do you guys think about this? Now, since we're already on the topic of money, a problem is rising right now for at least 6 million Americans. So the problem is the continued change of some establishments to just completely stop accepting cash, which means that they're now going cashless and instead they're relying on online payments and payments through credit cards or debit cards. So the challenge for those with no bank accounts is that they don't have access to these services. A very shocking revelation if you think about it being in the year 2024, but it's the truth.
The transition to paying entirely online is becoming difficult for some.
Genoa School District held a regional tournament for baseball over the weekend, and we were told by the AAA, which is the Arkansas Activities Association, that there would be no cash accepted, that all purchases for tickets had to be paid online.
Cash options might slowly be taken away, which is something our senior citizens are expected to adjust to. With the constant usage of smartphones and debit cards, online payment might eventually become the only option.
They were not allowed to accept cash at all. And there were a lot of people I could see just by body language were very exasperated. Some left.
She told me she has 2 people very close to her that do not own smartphones or debit cards.
And it just got me thinking about how marginalized that people will be by this, because I know my mother and my husband can't be the only people that this is affecting this way.
I know that there's ways to get around this, but not everybody has access to the different solutions for this kind of problem, which now brings me to a very sensitive topic, and that is debt. Yes, so right now, Americans, they're on average, they're having to shell out at least $350 per month more because of debt. Yep, it's true. Now, this is also mixed in with the higher costs and higher balances that continue to grow under these interest rates. Analysts also add that this is probably the best case scenario for some households, as more of them are probably paying way beyond that because they're forced to pay above the minimum each and every single month as to make a dent on these bills that continue to grow. Some experts argue that this isn't a very realistic outlook, even suggesting that we instead calculate what's left of Americans' paychecks after they pay for all their bills, which might actually show a very bleak reality. And speaking of some bad situations, a lot of American households right now are in the same boat. However, their problems are directly connected to the housing market. Brand new data has come out from Harvard University, and it's showing that the number of Americans who are now cost burdened by their monthly housing payment, it hit an all-time high of 22.4 million, or around half the tenants of the country. You gotta understand that the numbers here, they're very clear. And if you're spending above a specific percentage for housing, then yes, you may be considered cost burdened.
When we are talking about income versus monthly payments, what is the definition now of unaffordable?
That's a great question, and it depends on really like which standard you're using. So if you ask the mortgage industry or if you ask the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, it's somewhere between 28% of your annual income or 30%, somewhere around that area, the high 20s and the low 30s. But what's significant about this data that just came out is it's showing that if you get a house today, factoring in your mortgage payment and your property taxes, you got to get homeowners insurance, you'll end up paying somewhere around 35% of your annual income to afford a house. So that's way, way higher than what normal standards would consider affordable.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, Chris, that there is a differential among different demographic groups. Is that true? Are there some that are being harder hit by the lack of affordable homes right now?
I mean, look, it's hard to get a home whoever you are and wherever you are. But yeah, in particular, it seems to be hurting first-time home buyers the most. They're the most sensitive to these changes in the mortgage rates that you were just talking about. And then also millennial homeowners or people who are trying to find a home because their wages aren't as strong as they were maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. So what they are trying to do to save up for a home payment is just a tougher task these days for them.
Now, you're probably thinking to yourself that 35% of your income just to pay for housing, it's a bit much, right? But did you know that like 12.1 million households right here in the country right now are having to pay out about 50% or more of their monthly income just to housing costs? This also raises a concern for 2024, which is the risk of losing your job due to interest rates being kept up for so high for so long. It's also very clear that we should expect even more of these layoffs as we go along with this year 2024.
REI announced today it is laying off more than 350 workers. The roles range from corporate employees to distribution centers, but do not include the stores. In a memo to employees, REI's CEO said the cuts were, quote, primarily driven by financial necessity and that it expects a challenging year ahead.
It's endemic right now. It's not just REI, it's several other stores. And it has to do with the nature of the city right now.
Meantime, the REI in Portland's Pearl District is closing amid high crime in the area. The company says in the past year, it saw more break-ins and thefts at this location than in the last 2 decades, and that's despite beefed up security.
As you guys can see, trouble continues to just kind of show up everywhere. You see it in the banks, in the housing market, real estate, and of course, even with retailers and businesses. It's just almost impossible to avoid going through these hard times nowadays. But what do you guys think about all this? Now, before I go, I just want to thank you guys so much for always hitting the like button. Thank you for sharing my videos. I appreciate you guys, and I'm gonna see you guys on the next one. Y'all take care and be safe.